Okay, so I need to tell you something. And honestly, this might completely change how you see the people in your life. Because we're about to rank all 12 zodiac signs from least to most manipulative. And before you click away thinking this is just another astrology video making broad generalizations, I want you to understand something crucial. Every single person manipulates. Yes. Even you. Even me. The question isn't whether someone manipulates. It's how they do it. Why they do it. And how conscious they are of doing it. Here's what most people don't realize about manipulation. It's not always this dark, sinister thing where someone's twirling their mustache plotting your downfall. Sometimes manipulation is so subtle, so wrapped in good intentions or emotional vulnerability, that you don't even recognize it's happening until months or years later when you look back and think, wait, how did I end up here? And that's exactly what we're going to unpack today. I've spent years studying not just astrology, but human behavior patterns. And what I've noticed is that each zodiac sign has a completely different relationship with manipulation. Some signs manipulate because they're terrified of direct conflict. Some do it because they genuinely believe they know what's best for everyone. Some manipulate as a defense mechanism, a way to protect themselves from being hurt first. And some are just really good at reading people and using that information strategically. Now, if you've been in a situation recently where you felt like someone was pulling strings but you couldn't quite put your finger on how, there's a very specific reason that's happening. And I'm going to break down exactly which signs are most likely to use which tactics later in this video. But first, I need to explain what we actually mean by manipulation. Because this word gets thrown around a lot without people really understanding its full scope. Manipulation isn't just lying or scheming. It's any behavior designed to influence someone else's thoughts, feelings, or actions in a way that primarily serves your own interests. Often without the other person fully realizing what's happening. And here's where it gets interesting. Some manipulation is relatively harmless. Your friend suggesting a restaurant they want to try by mentioning how much you'd love it. That's mild manipulation. But some manipulation is deeply damaging. Gaslighting someone into questioning their own reality. Using guilt to control behavior. Exploiting vulnerabilities to maintain power. The zodiac signs we're ranking today fall across this entire spectrum. And what I've realized through both astrological study and real-world observation is that the most manipulative signs are always the ones you'd expect. Sometimes the signs everyone warns you about are actually more straightforward than the ones who seem sweet and harmless on the surface. Before we dive into the ranking, I want to be clear about something. Having manipulative tendencies doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you human. What matters is awareness. Are you conscious of these patterns? Are you willing to examine them? Are you using influence in ways that respect other people's autonomy? Or are you crossing lines? That self-awareness is what separates someone who occasionally uses persuasion from someone who systematically controls and exploits others. And here's what I think is really important to understand. The least manipulative signs on this list aren't necessarily better people. They're just more direct. Sometimes the directness is refreshing and honest. Sometimes it's brutal and insensitive. Similarly, the most manipulative signs aren't necessarily worse people. They're just more strategic. Sometimes that strategy is protective and necessary. Sometimes it's toxic and destructive. Context matters. Intention matters. Impact matters. So as we go through this ranking, I want you to think about the people in your life, your partner, your boss, your best friend, your family members. Where do they fall on this spectrum? And more importantly, where do you fall? Because I guarantee you, by the end of this video, you're going to recognize yourself in at least one of these descriptions. And that recognition, that moment of seeing your own patterns clearly, that's when real growth becomes possible. Let's start at the bottom of the manipulation scale with the signs that are so straightforward. They wouldn't know how to manipulate someone if you handed them a manual. Number 12. Sagittarius. The sign that literally cannot keep a secret or hide an agenda. If you're a Sagittarius or you know one well, You already know what I'm talking about. These people are constitutionally incapable of sustained manipulation because they lack the fundamental requirement: the ability to filter their thoughts before they become words. Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter, the planet of expansion, truth, and philosophical honesty, and while that makes them incredible teachers, adventurers, and truth seekers, it makes them absolutely terrible at any kind of strategic deception. Here's what happens when a Sagittarius tries to manipulate someone. They start with a plan. Maybe they want to convince you to do something, or they're trying to avoid an uncomfortable conversation. They begin with some version of strategic communication, and then, within approximately 30 seconds, they accidentally tell you exactly what they're doing. They can't help it. The truth just comes spilling out, often in the form of a joke or a brutally honest observation that completely undermines whatever subtle approach they were attempting. I've watched this happen countless times. I Sagittarius' friend trying to get out of plans by claiming they're sick, and then immediately mentioning the party they're actually going to instead. A Sagittarius co-worker attempting to take credit for a project, and then within the same conversation, accidentally giving credit to everyone else who actually did the work. They're not trying to be honest. They're just incapable of sustained dishonesty. Does that mean Sagittarius never manipulates? No, they absolutely do. But their manipulation is so obvious, so transparent, that it barely counts. They'll use humor to deflect from serious conversations. They'll change the subject when things get uncomfortable. They'll make grand promises they have no intention of keeping. Not because they're lying, but because in the moment they genuinely believe they'll follow through, and then they forget, or they get distracted, or they realize it's harder than they thought, and they just move on to the next thing. The reason Sagittarius ranks dead last in manipulation is simple. They lack the patience, the attention to detail, and the emotional calculation required for effective manipulation. They're too busy chasing the next adventure, the next idea, the next truth. And honestly, that's kind of beautiful. In a world where everyone's playing chess, Sagittarius is the person who flips the board and suggests you all go hiking instead. But here's what you need to watch out for with Sagittarius. Their lack of manipulation doesn't mean they can't hurt you. Their blunt honesty can be devastating. Their inability to commit can leave you hanging. Their tendency to prioritize freedom over responsibility can make them unreliable. They're not manipulating you, right? But they might be disappointing you, might? And sometimes that hurts just as much. Number 11. Aries. The sign that's too impatient to manipulate effectively. The pioneer. The sign that charges head first into everything with the subtlety of a battering ram. And while that makes them incredible leaders, entrepreneurs, and initiators, it makes them pretty terrible manipulators. Because manipulation requires patience. It requires planning. It requires the ability to play the long game. And Aries wants what they want right now. Here's how an Aries approaches getting what they want. They ask for it directly. If that doesn't work, they demand it. If that doesn't work, they get angry. If that doesn't work, they move on to something else because they've already lost interest. There's no elaborate scheme, no emotional chess game, no subtle psychological warfare, just direct action, immediate reaction, and a complete inability to hide their intentions. I've seen Aries try to manipulate, and it's almost comical. They'll attempt to use guilt, but they're so bad at it that you can see them getting frustrated with their own performance. They'll try to be strategic, but their impatience betrays them within minutes. They'll start a manipulation attempt, realize it's taking too long, and just blurt out what they actually want instead. The closest Aries gets to manipulation is intimidation. They'll use their natural intensity, their aggressive energy, their willingness to confront, to pressure people into compliance. But that's not really manipulation. That's just force. And while it can be effective in the short term, it's not the kind of subtle, psychological influence that characterizes true manipulation. What you need to understand about Aries is that their greatness is both their greatest strength and their biggest weakness. On one hand, you always know where you stand with them. They're not plotting behind your back. They're not playing mind games. What you see is what you get. On the other hand, that directness can be brutal. They'll tell you exactly what they think, even when it hurts. They'll pursue what they want without considering how it affects you. They'll make decisions impulsively without consulting anyone. But here's the thing about Aries that people often miss. Their lack of manipulation doesn't mean they're not selfish. They absolutely can be. They just pursue their self-interest openly rather than covertly, and in some ways, that's easier to deal with. You can set boundaries with an Aries. You can push back. You can have a direct confrontation and clear the air. Try doing that with a truly manipulative sign, and you'll find yourself in a psychological maze with no exit. The reason Aries ranks so low on the manipulation scale is that they lack the fundamental temperament for it. They're too hot-headed, too impulsive, too honest in their selfishness. They're the sign that says exactly what they're thinking. Consequences be damned. And while that can be refreshing, it can also be exhausting. Because sometimes you don't want brutal honesty. Sometimes you want tact, diplomacy, emotional intelligence. And those are not Aries' strong suits. Number 10. Aquarius. The sign that's too detached to bother manipulating. Now, Aquarius is interesting because they absolutely have the intellectual capacity to manipulate. They're brilliant strategists. They understand human psychology. They can read patterns and predict behavior. But here's the thing. They usually can't be bothered. Manipulation requires emotional investment, and Aquarius operates primarily from the mental realm. They're too busy thinking about humanitarian causes, technological innovation, or abstract philosophical concepts to waste energy on interpersonal manipulation. When Aquarius wants something, they typically use logic and reason. They'll present you with a well-constructed argument for why their way makes sense. They'll appeal to your rationality, your sense of fairness, your desire to be part of something progressive. And if that doesn't work, they'll just do their own thing anyway. They're not going to cry, guilt trip, or emotionally manipulate you into compliance. That feels beneath them. The manipulation Aquarius does engage in is intellectual. They'll use their superior knowledge to make you feel less informed. They'll position themselves as the expert, the visionary, the one who sees what others can't. They'll create an in-group of people who get it and an out-group of people who don't. And they'll make you want to be in that in-group. But even this isn't really manipulation in the traditional sense. It's more like intellectual gatekeeping. What makes Aquarius rank low on this list is their fundamental detachment. They're not emotionally invested enough in most relationships to manipulate them. They value independence, both their own and yours. They don't want to control you because that would require them to care deeply about what you do, and most of the time, they're more interested in their own projects and ideas. But here's where Aquarius can surprise you. When they do decide to manipulate, when something matters enough to them that they're willing to engage emotionally, they can be devastatingly effective, because they've been observing human behavior from a distance their entire lives. They know exactly which buttons to push. They just rarely choose to push them. The danger with Aquarius isn't active manipulation. It's passive manipulation through withdrawal. They'll emotionally detach when you need them most. They'll intellectualize, i.e., your feelings instead of validating them. They'll make you feel like you're being too emotional, too conventional, and before you know it, you're changing yourself to fit their vision of what a relationship should be, all while they maintain their position of cool, detached superiority. Number 9. Leo. The sign that manipulates through performance and pride. Leo is where things start to get interesting, because this is the first sign on our list that actually has a sophisticated manipulation strategy, even if they don't always realize they're using it. Leo manipulates through the theater of their own personality. They create a performance so compelling, so magnetic, so larger than life, that you want to be part of their story, And once you're invested in their narrative, they have influence over you. Here's how Leo manipulation works. They don't scheme in the shadows. They don't plot and calculate. Instead, they create a reality where they are the sun and everyone else orbits around them. They do this through charisma, through generosity, through making you feel special when you're in their favor. And then, when they want something from you, they don't ask directly. They create a situation where disappointing them feels like betraying someone who's been so good to you. I've watched this play out in so many relationships. A Leo boss who's incredibly generous with praise and recognition, who makes you feel like you're part of something important, who treats the team like family. And then when they need you to work late, to take on extra projects, to sacrifice your personal time, you do it, not because they demanded it, but because you don't want to let them down. You don't want to be the one person who isn't pulling their weight in this amazing team they've built. The manipulation is in the setup. Leo creates emotional debt. They give you attention, validation, recognition, all the things humans crave, and then they collect on that debt, often without even consciously realizing that's what they're doing. In their mind, they're just asking their loyal supporters to show up for them the way they've shown up for everyone else. But the reality is, they've created a dynamic where saying no feels like betrayal. What makes Leo's manipulation particularly effective is that it's wrapped in genuine warmth. They're not cold calculators. They really do care about the people in their orbit. They really do want to be generous and supportive. But they also need constant validation, constant attention, constant proof that they matter, and they've learned it, often unconsciously, that the best way to ensure that validation keeps coming is to make people feel indebted to them. The dark side of Leo manipulation emerges when their pride is wounded. If you criticize them, if you don't give them the recognition they believe they deserve, if you dare to outshine them, suddenly that warmth disappears. They'll withdraw their favor. They'll make you feel the absence of their attention. And because they've trained you to crave their approval, that withdrawal is devastating. But here's what you need to understand about Leo. Their manipulation is almost always defensive. They're not trying to destroy you or control every aspect of your life. They're trying to protect their ego, to maintain their position at the center of their social universe, to ensure they never feel insignificant or overlooked. And if you can navigate that, if you can give them genuine recognition while maintaining your own boundaries, they can be incredibly loyal and supportive. Number 8. Taurus, the sign that manipulates through stubborn persistence. Taurus doesn't manipulate through emotional games or intellectual superiority. They manipulate through sheer, immovable persistence. They decide what they want, and then they simply refuse to budge until reality bends to accommodate them. It's not flashy, it's not dramatic, but it's incredibly effective. Here's the thing about Taurus manipulation. It doesn't look like manipulation at first. It looks like preference, like having standards, like knowing what they like. A Taurus will express what they want calmly, reasonably, without apparent pressure. But then they'll express it again, and again, and again. They'll bring it up in different contexts, frame it in different ways, present it as the obvious logical choice. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, their preference becomes the default option. I've seen this in relationships where a Taurus wants to move to a specific city, or buy a specific house, or make a specific life choice. They don't fight about it. They don't issue ultimatums. They just consistently, persistently, relentlessly advocate for their position. They'll show you articles about why their choice makes sense. They'll take you to visit the place they want to move. They'll casually mention how much better life would be if you just did things their way. And eventually, most people give in. Not because they were convinced, but because they're exhausted. This is what I call erosion manipulation. Like water wearing down stone, Taurus doesn't force change through dramatic action. They achieve it through patient, consistent pressure applied over time. And the brilliant part is that by the time you realize you've been manipulated, You've already made the decision. You've already committed. And Taurus will genuinely believe that you came to this conclusion on your own. Because they never forced you. They just made their preference so consistently clear that any other option became uncomfortable. The other way Taurus manipulates is through comfort and security. They're incredibly good at creating environments where you feel safe, stable, taken care of. They'll cook for you. They'll make your home beautiful. They'll handle practical matters that stress you out. And in return, they expect loyalty and compliance with their way of doing things. It's a transaction. But it's wrapped in such genuine care that you don't recognize it as manipulation until you try to do something they don't approve of. When you go against a Taurus's wishes, you don't get explosive anger. You get withdrawal of comfort. Suddenly the home-cooked meals stop. The helpful gestures disappear. The warm, nurturing energy turns cold. They don't yell or threaten. They just make it clear through their actions that life is much more pleasant when you do things their way. And most people, consciously or unconsciously, adjust their behavior to restore that comfort. What makes Taurus manipulation particularly insidious is its subtlety. They're not gaslighting you or playing mind games. They're just being themselves, consistently and persistently. And their version of themselves happens to be someone who knows exactly what they want and has infinite patience to wait for you to come around to their way of thinking. The manipulation is in the assumption that their preferences should be everyone's preferences. And the quiet, steady pressure they apply to make that assumption reality. Number 7. Capricorn. The sign that manipulates through authority and long-term strategy. Capricorn is where we start in truly strategic manipulation territory. These are the chess players of the Zodiac, the ones who think N moves ahead, who understand that real power isn't about winning individual battles but about positioning yourself to win the war. Capricorn manipulates through structure, through authority, through making themselves indispensable to your success. Here's how Capricorn manipulation works in practice. They identify what you want, what you need, what you're ambitious about. And then they position themselves as the gatekeeper to that goal. They become your mentor, your boss, your advisor, the person who has the connections, the knowledge, the resources you need to succeed. And once you're dependent on them, once you've invested time and energy into this relationship, they have leverage. I've seen this play out in professional settings more than anywhere else. A Capricorn manager who takes a junior employee under their wing, who provides opportunities and guidance, who genuinely helps them grow. But there's always a price. The late nights, the weekend work, the personal sacrifices that are framed as necessary steps on the path to success. And because the Capricorn has positioned themselves as the architect of your career advancement, questioning their methods feels like jeopardizing your future. The brilliance of Capricorn manipulation is that it's built on real value. They're not lying when they say they can help you. They really do have the skills, the connections, the strategic thinking to advance your goals. But they use that genuine value as leverage. They create a dynamic where your success is tied to their approval, where stepping out of line means losing access to the resources they control. Capricorn also manipulates through the appearance of objectivity. They present their preferences as logical conclusions, their desires as practical necessities, their control as responsible leadership. They'll create systems and structures that happen to benefit them, and then enforce those systems as if they're universal laws rather than personal preferences. And because they do it with such authority, such apparent rationality, most people don't question it. What's particularly dangerous about Capricorn manipulation is its long-term nature. They're not looking for quick wins. They're building empires, and they need loyal subjects to maintain those empires. So they invest in you. They develop you. They create genuine bonds. But those bonds come with expectations, and if you ever try to leave, if you ever challenge their authority, you'll discover just how much power they've accumulated over you. The key to understanding Capricorn manipulation is recognizing that it's almost always about control and legacy. They're not manipulating you because they're cruel, because they enjoy it. They're manipulating you because they have a vision for how things should be, and they need people to fall in line with that vision. In their mind, they're not being manipulative. They're being a leader. They're providing structure in a chaotic world. They're helping you achieve things you couldn't achieve on your own. And all of that might be true. But it's also true that they're using those genuine contributions to maintain power and control. Number 6. Virgo. The sign that manipulates through criticism and perfectionism. Virgo manipulation is subtle, constant, and incredibly damaging because it targets your self-esteem. Virgo doesn't manipulate through grand gestures or dramatic emotional displays. They manipulate through 1,000 tiny cuts, through pointing out flaws, through setting impossible standards, strange, right? Through making you feel like you're never quite good enough. Here's how it works. A Virgo will offer to help you, to improve you, to make your life better. And their intentions are oft ungenuinely good. They really do want to help. But their help comes with constant feedback, constant correction, constant suggestions for how you could be doing things better. And slowly, imperceptibly, you start to internalize their voice. You start to see yourself through their critical lens. You start to believe that you need their guidance to function properly. I've watched this dynamic destroy people's confidence. A Virgo partner who's always pointing out small mistakes, always suggesting improvements, always noticing what's wrong rather than what's right. They frame it as being helpful, as caring enough to be honest, as wanting you to reach your full potential. But the cumulative effect is that you start to doubt yourself. You start to feel incompetent. You start to believe that without their constant oversight and correction, you'll fail. The manipulation is in the framing. Virgo presents their criticism as service, their control as care, their perfectionism as high standards that benefit everyone. And because they're oft unright about the specific details, because their suggestions often do improve things, it's hard to argue with them. But what you don't realize until it's too late is that you've become dependent on their approval, that you've lost trust in your own judgment, that you're constantly seeking their validation because they've trained you to believe you can't succeed without it. Virgo also manipulates through martyrdom. They'll take on enormous amounts of work. They'll sacrifice their own needs. They'll handle everything themselves because nobody else can do it right. And then they'll use that sacrifice as leverage. They'll make you feel guilty for not meeting their standards, for creating more work for them, for not being as dedicated or as capable as they are. And before you know it, you're trying to prove yourself worthy of their effort, constantly working to earn their approval. What makes Virgo manipulation particularly insidious is that it's often unconscious. Most Virgos don't realize they're being manipulative. They genuinely believe they're being helpful. They genuinely think their criticism is constructive. They genuinely feel like they're carrying an unfair burden. That the impact on the people around them is real. The erosion of confidence. The constant anxiety about making mistakes. The feeling that you're never quite good enough. That's the cost of being in close relationship with a manipulative Virgo. The way to handle Virgo manipulation is to recognize that their standards are their standards, not universal truths. Their way of doing things is one way, not the only way. Their criticism says more about their need for control than it does about your actual competence. But that's hard to remember when you're in the thick of it. When someone you care about is constantly pointing out your flaws while framing it as love. Number 5. Libra. The sign that manipulates through charm and strategic people-pleasing. Now we're entering the territory of signs that are consciously aware of their manipulative abilities and use them strategically. Libra is fascinating because they're oft unseen as the nice sign, the diplomatic sign, the sign that just wants everyone to get along. And all of that is true. But what people don't realize is that Libra's niceness is often a strategy, a way of managing relationships to ensure they get what they want while maintaining their image as the good guy. Here's how Libra manipulation works. They're masters of reading the room, of understanding what each person wants to hear, of presenting themselves in whatever way will be most appealing to their current audience. They don't have one personality. They have a collection of personalities, and they deploy whichever one will be most effective in any given situation. This isn't necessarily conscious deception. It's more like they're so focused on maintaining harmony and getting people to like them that they've lost touch with who they actually are beneath all the performance. Libra manipulates through agreement. They'll tell you what you want to hear. They'll validate your perspective. They'll make you feel understood. And then they'll do the exact same thing with the person who has the opposite perspective. They're not taking a stand. They're collecting allies. They're making sure that no matter what happens, they have people on their side. I've seen this in group dynamics where a Libra will privately agree with everyone's conflicting positions, making each person believe the Libra is on their side, and then when a decision needs to be made, the Libra positions themselves as the neutral mediator, the voice of reason, the one who can see all perspectives. But they're not neutral. They've been strategically building support for their preferred outcome the entire time. They've just done it so smoothly that nobody realizes they've been played. The other way Libra manipulates is through strategic withdrawal. If you displease them, if you create conflict, if you make them uncomfortable, they don't confront you directly. They just become unavailable. They're suddenly busy. They're dealing with other things. They can't make time for you right now. And because they've trained you to value their approval, because they've made themselves so pleasant to be around, that withdrawal is painful. You find yourself working to get back in their good graces, often without them having to explicitly tell you what you did wrong. What makes Libra manipulation so effective is that it's wrapped in genuine charm and social intelligence. They really are good at making people feel valued. They really do create harmonious environments. They really are skilled at finding compromise. But they use those skills strategically, to position themselves advantageously, to avoid taking responsibility, to ensure they're always seen as the good guy even when they're acting in their own self-interest. The danger with Libra isn't that they're malicious. It's that they're so conflict-averse, so desperate to be liked, that they'll sacrifice honesty for harmony. They'll let problems fester rather than address them directly. They'll manipulate situations to avoid uncomfortable conversations. And by the time you realize what's happening, you're trapped in a web of half-truths and strategic omissions, all delivered with a smile. Number 4. Cancer. The sign that manipulates through emotional dependency and guilt. Cancer is where manipulation becomes deeply emotional and incredibly difficult to escape. Cancer doesn't manipulate through logic or charm or authority. They manipulate through your feelings. Through creating emotional bonds so strong that breaking them feels like tearing apart your own heart. And they do this, often unconsciously, because they're terrified of abandonment. Here's how Cancer manipulation works in practice. They create a dynamic where you become responsible for their emotional well-being. They share their vulnerabilities, their fears, their pain, and they do it in a way that makes you feel special, chosen, trusted. You become their safe person, their emotional support, the one who understands them like nobody else does. And once that bond is established, they have enormous power over you. The manipulation comes in how they use that bond. When you try to set boundaries, they don't argue or get angry. They get hurt. They withdraw into their shell. They make you feel like you've wounded them deeply, like you're being cruel or insensitive. And because you care about them, because you've invested in this emotional connection, you back down, you apologize, you adjust your behavior to avoid causing them pain. I've watched Cancer manipulation destroy people's ability to have healthy boundaries. A Cancer parent who makes their adult child feel guilty for living their own life, for not calling enough, for not being available enough. They don't say you're a bad child directly. They just sigh and say it's fine. I'll manage. I'm used to being alone. They create a narrative where their suffering is directly connected to your choices. And the only way to alleviate their pain is to sacrifice your own needs. Cancer also manipulates through caretaking. They'll nurture you, feed you, take care of you when you're sick, remember every important date, anticipate your needs before you voice them. And all of that feels wonderful. It feels like love. but it creates debt. It creates obligation. And when they need something from you, when they want you to stay when you want to leave, when they want you to choose them over your own growth, they'll remind you of everything they've done for you. Not explicitly, but through hurt looks, through references to all the times they were there for you, through making you feel like leaving them would be the ultimate betrayal. What makes cancer manipulation so devastating is that it targets your empathy. If you're a caring person, if you don't want to hurt people, if you value emotional connection, you're incredibly vulnerable to cancer's tactics. They're not threatening you or deceiving you. They're just making you feel responsible for their happiness. And that responsibility becomes a cage. The key to understanding cancer manipulation is recognizing that it comes from genuine fear. They're not trying to control you because they're power hungry. They're trying to control you because they're terrified you'll leave. They've been hurt before. They've been abandoned before. And they've learned that the way to prevent that pain is to make themselves indispensable, to create emotional bonds so strong that breaking them becomes unthinkable. But that doesn't make the manipulation any less real, any less damaging. Number 3 for that. Pisces. The sign that manipulates through victimhood and emotional chaos. Pisces manipulation is slippery, elusive, and incredibly difficult to pin down because it operates in the realm of feelings, intuition, and emotional ambiguity. Pisces doesn't manipulate through clear tactics or conscious strategy. They manipulate through creating emotional fog, through making you feel like you're the one being unreasonable, through positioning themselves as the victim even when they're the one causing harm. Here's what Pisces manipulation looks like. They'll do something that hurts you, something that crosses a boundary or breaks a promise. And when you try to address it, they don't defend their actions or apologize clearly. Instead, they dissolve. They cry. They talk about how hard things have been for them, how they never meant to hurt you. And suddenly, instead of them taking responsibility for their behavior, you're comforting them. You're the one apologizing for bringing it up. You're the one feeling guilty for making them feel bad. This is what I call emotional judo. Pisces takes the energy of your legitimate grievance and redirects it back at you. They make you feel like you're being too harsh, too demanding, too insensitive to their struggles. And because they genuinely are sensitive, because they genuinely do struggle with the harsh realities of life, it's hard to tell where legitimate vulnerability ends and manipulation begins. I've seen Pisces manipulation trap people in relationships for years. A Pisces partner who's constantly in crisis, constantly needing support, constantly dealing with some new drama or tragedy. And you stay because you care, because you want to help, because leaving someone when they're struggling feels cruel. But what you don't realize until much later is that the crisis never ends. There's always something. There's always a reason why now isn't the right time to address your needs, to have difficult conversations, to expect them to show up consistently. Pisces also manipulates through confusion and ambiguity. They'll make promises they don't keep, but they'll do it in such a vague, dreamy way that you can't quite hold them accountable. They said they would try. They said they wanted to. They said they hoped things would work out. But they never actually committed. And when you point out that they didn't follow through, they'll look at you with those big, hurt eyes and say they never promised anything. You must have misunderstood. You're being unfair. What makes Pisces manipulation particularly insidious is that they oft unbelieve their own narrative. They're not consciously lying. They genuinely see themselves as the victim, as the one who's trying their best in a cruel world, as the one who's being misunderstood and mistreated. Their manipulation isn't calculated. It's instinctive. It's a survival mechanism they've developed to avoid taking responsibility while still getting their needs met. The danger with Pisces is that their manipulation is so wrapped up in genuine emotion that it's nearly impossible to separate truth from fiction. They're not gaslighting you in the traditional sense. They're creating an emotional reality where facts don't matter, where feelings are the only truth, where your attempt to establish clear boundaries or expectations makes you the bad guy. And if you're someone who values empathy, who wants to be understanding, who doesn't want to be cruel, you'll find yourself trapped in their emotional undertow, constantly making excuses for behavior that would be unacceptable from anyone else. Number 2. Gemini. The sign that manipulates through information control and strategic communication. Gemini is where we enter truly masterful manipulation territory. These are the information brokers of the Zodiac. The ones who understand that knowledge is power and that controlling the flow of information gives you control over reality itself. Gemini manipulates through words, through framing, through telling different versions of the truth to different people and keeping track of all the threads. Here's how Gemini manipulation works. They're brilliant communicators, which means they know exactly how to present information to get the response they want. They'll tell you a story, but they'll leave out crucial details that would change your interpretation. They'll share gossip that positions them favorably while making others look bad. They'll ask leading questions that guide you toward the conclusion they want you to reach, all while making you feel like you came to that conclusion independently. I've watched Gemini manipulation tear apart friend groups and workplaces. A Gemini who tells person A that person B said something negative about them, then tells person B that person A is upset with them, then positions themselves as the neutral party trying to help everyone get along. They're not lying. Exactly. They're just selectively sharing information in a way that creates conflict between others while making themselves indispensable as the mediator. Gemini also manipulates through charm and adaptability. They can be whoever you need them to be in any given moment. They'll mirror your communication style, your interests, your values. They'll make you feel like you've found someone who truly gets you. And then you'll discover they're doing the exact same thing with 10 other people, each of whom believes they have a special connection with this Gemini. What makes Gemini manipulation so effective is their intelligence and their speed. They think faster than most people. They process information more quickly. They can construct and deconstruct arguments in real time. This means that in any verbal confrontation, they have a massive advantage. They'll twist your words. They'll point out logic inconsistencies. They'll make you doubt your own memory of events. And they'll do it so smoothly, with such apparent reasonableness, that you'll walk away from the conversation feeling confused and unsure of yourself. The other aspect of Gemini manipulation is their ability to compartmentalize. They can maintain multiple contradictory narratives simultaneously without experiencing cognitive dissonance. They'll tell you one thing, tell someone else the opposite, and genuinely believe both versions are true in their respective contexts. This isn't necessarily conscious deception. It's more that Gemini sees truth as fluid, as dependent on perspective and framing, and they use that fluidity strategically. What you need to understand about Gemini manipulation is that it's almost always about maintaining options and avoiding commitment. They manipulate to keep doors open, to ensure they're never trapped, to maintain the freedom to change their mind or their story as circumstances change. They're not trying to destroy you. They're just trying to maintain maximum flexibility in their own life. And if that requires telling you what you want to hear while doing something completely different, they'll do it without hesitation. The way to protect yourself from Gemini manipulation is to verify information independently, to pay attention to actions rather than words, and to recognize that their version of events is always just that, a version, carefully constructed to serve their interests. But even knowing this, it's hard to resist their charm, their wit, their ability to make you feel like you're having the most interesting conversation of your life. Number 1. Scorpio, the sign that manipulates through power, intensity, and psychological warfare. Scorpio is the most manipulative sign in the zodiac, and it's not even close. While other signs manipulate unconsciously or situationally, Scorpio manipulates strategically, deliberately, and with a level of psychological sophistication that can be genuinely frightening. They don't just want to influence your behavior, they want to understand your deepest fears, your hidden vulnerabilities, your secret desires, and then use that knowledge to maintain power and control. Here's what makes Scorpio manipulation so devastating. They're patient. They'll spend months or even years studying you, learning what makes you tick, identifying your weak points, building trust and intimacy. And then, when they need to, they'll use all of that information against you with surgical precision. They know exactly what to say to make you doubt yourself, exactly what to do to make you feel guilty, exactly how to push your buttons to get the reaction they want. Scorpio manipulates through intensity and intimacy. They create bonds that feel deeper than anything you've experienced before. They make you feel seen, understood, known in a way that's both exhilarating and terrifying. They share their own darkness, their own secrets, creating a sense of mutual vulnerability that makes you feel safe opening up to them. But that vulnerability is strategic. They're gathering intelligence. They're creating leverage. I've seen Scorpio manipulation destroy people's sense of reality. A Scorpio partner who knows every insecurity you have, every mistake you've made, every fear you carry. And when you try to leave, when you try to set boundaries, when you do anything that threatens their control, they'll use all of that knowledge against you. They'll remind you of your failures. They'll make you feel like nobody else could possibly love you. They'll convince you that you're the problem, that you're the one who's damaged, that you need them to function. Scorpio also manipulates through strategic silence and withdrawal. They don't need to yell or threaten. They just go cold. They withhold affection, attention, communication. And because they've trained you to crave their intensity, because they've made themselves the center of your emotional world, that withdrawal is agonizing. You'll do almost anything to get them to engage with you again, to restore that connection, to feel that intensity once more. What makes Scorpio manipulation truly dangerous is their ability to play the long game. They're not looking for quick wins. They're building empires of psychological control. They'll forgive betrayals. They'll tolerate behavior they don't like. They'll appear to compromise, all while keeping score, all while waiting for the right moment to collect on every debt, to remind you of every time they were the bigger person, to use your own history against you. Scorpio manipulates through transformation. They'll identify what you want to change about yourself, what you're ashamed of, what you're trying to overcome, and they'll position themselves as the catalyst for your transformation, the one who can help you become who you want to be. But that transformation comes with strings. It comes with debt. It comes with the understanding that they made you, and they can unmake you just as easily. The psychological warfare aspect of Scorpio manipulation is what sets them apart from every other sign. They don't just want to win. They want you to know you've lost. They want you to understand that they were always 3 steps ahead, that you never had a chance, that they saw through you from the beginning. And they'll reveal this in moments of conflict, pulling back the curtain to show you just how thoroughly they've been controlling the situation, leaving you feeling exposed, manipulated, and powerless. What you need to understand about Scorpio is that their manipulation comes from a place of deep fear and trauma. They manipulate because they've been hurt, because they've been betrayed, because they learned early that vulnerability is dangerous and control is survival. They're not evil. They're wounded. But that doesn't make their manipulation any less real or any less damaging. The only way to protect yourself from Scorpio manipulation is to maintain your own sense of self, to refuse to give them complete access to your psyche, to recognize when intensity crosses the line into control. But that's incredibly difficult because what Scorpio offers, that depth, that passion, that feeling of being truly known, is intoxicating. And by the time you realize you've been manipulated, you're already so entangled that extraction feels impossible. So there you have it. The complete ranking from least to most manipulative. And I want to end with this thought. Every single sign on this list has the capacity for both healthy influence and toxic manipulation. The difference isn't in the zodiac sign. It's in the level of self-awareness, the willingness to examine your own behavior, the commitment